Okay, last time we talked about the three kinds of argument. We finished off by talking about deductive arguments. Today we're first going to talk about rejecting arguments. So an argument can go wrong in either of, or both for that matter, of two ways. It can have a false premise or it can have a bad inference. So here's an argument. If that was 5 minutes, then you wouldn't be arguing, but you are arguing, therefore that wasn't 5 minutes. This is the argument that was had in the video if you watched it, the argument clinic video. The person who was paying for the argument, after the other guy had said you haven't paid, made this argument. And the person who was supposedly had been paid for the argument but was denying that he was paid rejected premise one. He said, it's not true that if that was 5 minutes, then I wouldn't be arguing. Why is that not true? Because I might be arguing in my spare time. So when he said I might be arguing in my spare time, he was rejecting premise one. So one way he can say, look, your conclusion doesn't follow, is by rejecting one of the premises. That is to say that a premise is false. And this is the premise he chose to reject. He could have instead said, well, I'm not really arguing, and tried to reject that premise. The other way to reject a argument is to say that the inference is no good. To say, yes, I agree your premise is true. Yes, I agree this premise is true, but I don't think the conclusion follows. Now, if an argument's genuinely a deductive argument, the second move is not available, because every genuinely deductive argument has a good inference. The inference is good. But in an inductive argument, you can say, yes, I agree with your premises. Yes, I see why you think the conclusion follows, but it doesn't really follow. Or I know something extra that prevents it from following. And this is like the example of the seeing eye dog kind of meeting that I talked about last time. So you might say, yes, I agree that every mammal that's walked through that door in history has been human. And yes, I agree that that typically provides good reason to conclude that the next mammal to walk through the door will be human. But I don't agree that the next mammal to walk through the door will be human because I know this extra information that the next meeting in this room is of people with seeing eye dogs or something like that. So in that case, it's an inductive argument, and you say, yes, I agree with the premises, but I reject the conclusion because I think the inference is bad in this case. Okay, when an argument goes wrong in either way, when it has a false premise or a bad inference, the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. That doesn't mean the conclusion is false. The conclusion may well be true. All it means is that your premises don't support that conclusion. So if you do have reason to accept the conclusion, it's something else. It's not this argument that the person gave you. So the point of showing that an argument has a false premise or bad inference isn't to show that its conclusion is wrong. It's to show that this argument doesn't support the conclusion. Okay, now properties of arguments. So what are the features that arguments have that are important, and how should we talk about them? Because that's an important thing maybe to be able to sort of look at all by itself, I'm going to stop this segment there, even though it was very short, and talk about properties of arguments next time.